Think of the people you interact with every day. Would you want to spend a day in a canoe with them? I'm Nathan Mercereau, and as a financial advisor with over 25 years of experience, I've learned that the quality of the people you spend time with is a lot more valuable than what can show up in a set of financial projections. And growing up in Canada, I discovered you can learn a lot about a person when you spend a day in a canoe with them. So I created this show where I interview people I find interesting and inspiring. I invite you to listen in and learn from their stories so you can create the life you want, one filled with wealth, wisdom, meaning, and purpose. I'm delighted today to spend time with Cyrus Sigari. Cyrus is the co-founder and managing partner of Up Partners, and Up Partners builds and invests in technologies that help move people and goods cleaner, faster, safer, and at a lower cost on the ground, in the air, on the sea, and in space. Up's mission is to transform the moving world. Cyrus is considered one of the world's leading experts on advanced air mobility and electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft industries. Morgan Stanley predicts this industry will become a $1.4 trillion market by 2040. Cyrus, I've known you for a number of years. We've recently had great conversations. I'm delighted that you're here in the Day in a Canoe podcast. If you wouldn't mind sharing with listeners, what is it that you are focusing on right now with Up Partners?
Nathan, thanks for having me here. And I've enjoyed all of my canoe moments with you, and excited to have another canoe moment here on this podcast with you and your friends. You did a great job summarizing it, which is how do we take advantage of these incredible converging exponential technologies to transform a part of our lives that really hasn't changed a lot up until very recently, which is mobility. Mobility being land, air, sea, space, moving people, moving goods, is the underlying fabric of society. It's a $10 trillion market, and it's perhaps one of the most human things we can do, which is to move. Now, move our bodies or move our bodies, transport our bodies and move things is how we connect with one another. It's how we do commerce. It's how we learn. It's how we fight wars. I mean, there's a big spectrum of this exceptional world of mobility. And you can directly point to the greatest advancements in humanity's history to these new developments in mobility, from the most basic form being a human with 2 feet moving, walking, then to a bicycle, then to a car, then to a boat, and then to a plane, and then to a rocket, and kind of continues to go forward. And so you can track, as a function of time, increases in quality of life to these discrete advancements. And just to give you a specific example, flight is one I'm particularly passionate about, but it's all mobility, and which is the work we're doing. Been a pilot for 30 years, started flying when I was 11 years old, soloed at 16, got my license at 17, became a flight instructor, commercial pilot at 18, studied aerospace engineering in college, was a flight test engineer, a test pilot, started some aviation businesses. I've turned my passion to my profession. And staggering statistic, only 1 out of 5 humans living on the planet today has ever flown. 80% of humanity has never benefited from what all of us, and likely those on this call, have benefited from, which is how do I go a long distance in a very short period of time safely? And if you think about the consequences to humanity today, from how I got my Walmart package to my door, which flew on a plane to get to my house, or how I went to go see grandma, or went to go close a business deal, wouldn't have done it without an airplane. And so my hope and desire and dreams in this world is to be able to expand the benefits of these types of technologies, be it whatever domain of mobility, is to help the world go up, both spiritually, physically, materially, financially. So that was probably a much longer answer than you wanted, but that's my answer, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you. That's a great overview. What are the challenges that we're facing today compared to where your vision is? And I know that you gave a great example of really the literal energy we consume just to deliver a burrito to someone's house from a DoorDash order. I know there's many of those things that you're observing and trying to find solutions for.
So maybe I can start with just a little background on what it is we do at Up Partners. So we've got 3 sort of businesses. One is we are investors. So we have early stage venture capital funds that we invest into early stage technology companies that are transforming the moving world. We have our Up Labs business, which is a a venture studio that partners with the largest companies in the world to build businesses in partnership with these companies that address their core strategic problems that are problems of other companies in the world, where we build it together and then they have a pathway to acquire the business as part of their corporate development M&A strategy. And then we created something called the Up Summit, which has turned into the Davos of mobility that we do in partnership with the Walton family, Perot family, and we'll be announcing another major family in the not so distant future. And the whole sort of idea here is to build this ecosystem of the most impactful organizations, investors, policymakers, academicians, you name it, that all have to kind of come together to unlock this cornucopia of opportunity for humanity. And so that's sort of like the foundation of where we're operating from. But you asked the question of like, what are some of the specific examples of things that, we're spending time and energy on? And, you just use that example of this really crazy idea that like, we will use a 3,000-pound car burning compressed dinosaurs to go pick up a 10-ounce burrito and drive it 20 miles to get to somebody's house for a DoorDash delivery. Like, from a first principles perspective of like the carrier of the payload and the payload itself and its consumption of energy to do that relatively small task from an energy perspective is crazy. Now, granted, it's all we have to do right now, but there must be a better way to do that. And so one of the areas that's exploded as an area of opportunity is drone delivery. Now, people have been talking about drone delivery for a long time. And I offer that most of your callers or your viewers, rather, haven't benefited from a drone in their life, maybe playing with it as a toy, but not like it hasn't done anything for them. That's changing, and it's changing very rapidly. Last year, there was 1.5 million drone delivery flights. It was a 200% increase from the year before, which was a 200% increase from the year before that, which was a 200% increase from the year before that. We will wake up one day and there will be drone delivery flight into your backyard in every house in America, or more importantly, the world. And a lot of this technology is getting proven through very different use cases than delivering your food. It's been medical applications. So there's one particular company called Zipline, which really pioneered and brought a lot of attention to the space because their primary payload was blood, delivering blood with drones in Africa, where you're in these communities that don't have blood banks, and people would die because they couldn't get access to blood fast enough for the right type of blood. They didn't have, refrigeration or whatever. And now I think about 50% of the blood in Rwanda and Ghana is delivered via Zipline. And you can have blood delivered anywhere in the country through these drones within an hour. And shocking statistic, the number one cause of death for not having blood is women giving birth, postpartum bleeding. And so you have this like exceptionally fragile and beautiful moment in sort of explosion of life that's supposed to be good, and people die for unnecessary reasons. So that specific use case is like a perfect example of how these incredible technologies can come together to elevate the human experience. And yeah, I'm pretty fired up about all that, as you might be able to tell.
I love it. Now, I know that you're, being an aviator, so passionate about air mobility. What do you see happening in air mobility around electrification of aircraft, or any evolution or development around that space?
It's pretty shocking in that there are close to 600 companies developing some sort of flying car. Now, this flying car term has been around since the Jetsons, which just last year had its 60th anniversary, by the way, which is really interesting. And even more interesting than that is George Jetson in the show was born in 2022, and the show was set in 2062. So he was 40 years old in the show. And so I don't know if that was a coincidence or not. I don't think but there is such thing as a coincidence. But the age of the Jetsons has arrived. It's a real thing now, where you have these electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles that there's enough battery density, there's digital control systems, manufacturing, and a few other things that have all happened at the same time, where you can now put a person effectively in a drone big enough to carry a person and fly from A to B without having to be an expert aviator. This isn't like a thing happening 20 years from now. It's happening like today. Now, the question is, when do people get to benefit from this stuff? At scale, probably 10 to 20 years before people benefit at scale. But in the short term, it's happening like as we speak. And there's companies coming to market as we speak in various configurations. And some are more like recreational vehicles, toys, kind of things. And that's where this always starts. It starts as a toy and all of a sudden becomes a tool. And then it'll extrapolate to airlines using these vehicles to get people from their backyards to an airliner to go fly to wherever it might be. So every major automotive manufacturer in the world has got a strategy here, either an investment or a wholly owned company. Every major aerospace company, Boeing, Airbus, Cessna, Embraer, all of them, every one of them is developing something here. It's probably not going to happen as fast as people expect, but when it happens, it'll happen faster than they realized. If that makes sense.
It does. Could you unpack, though, the process of getting there? So there's some layering that has to happen. Obviously, the technology has to be great and sustainable, but there needs to be adoption. How does adoption cycles take place so that we get from point A to what you just described?
This is not a technology problem. Like I actually almost flew one not too long ago. The timing didn't work that day, but like they're out there. There's demonstrators working safely. This is primarily a certification problem. When you're dealing with operating in the sky, you're regulated by the FAA, by the European authorities. Every country has its own authority, and for good reason, because the sky is very hazardous. When things, you can't just pull over if things don't go right. Like it's a binary outcome. You either live or you die. Usually, if something goes wrong in a flying vehicle, so for good reason, there's regulation in and around the space, and this is not trivial. Like it took Boeing 2 years to recertify one system on the most successful, safest airplane ever built, the Boeing 737. This is the largest manufacturer of aircraft in the world. It took 2 years for that to happen. We're talking about certifying completely brand new systems and new use cases and in new environments, and also having to deal with noise. Like I don't want 10,000 of these things creating a lot of noise flying over my home in LA. That's not going to be fun. So what that means is you got to figure out the noise problem. And how do you solve the noise problem and get it to the point where it doesn't really meaningfully change the quality of life for animals and people and communities, where it becomes a nuisance? That's not going to work out so good. So investing in that type of technology, I've seen it. It's out there. It hasn't reached a scale yet, but like I think there's a solution for it. And then there's infrastructure. If there are these things hybrid and they're using fuel to power a generator that's powering electricity to go, so how do they get their gas? Or are they electric and they need charging stations? And we have a hard enough time with charging stations for electric cars. Building out a whole new infrastructure for flying vehicles, that's another challenge in itself. So there are real roadblocks that are short-term transient roadblocks. Like I think we're going to get through all of them. I think there's going to be some mishaps, just like that's just the way it is, But in the long, if I like fast forward to 20 years from now, holy smokes, I'm a recent dad. My son's 8 months old now. Like, man, he's going to live in a cool world, like with the stuff that's coming.
Now, as an entrepreneur, I know that you've gone through a lot of interesting, challenging, fulfilling, amazing, high and low experiences. A lot of our listeners go through business building processes, or they're executives, entrepreneurs themselves. And I always ask people, I'm curious, what are some things that you've learned along the way, like some aha moments or some takeaways? I find myself that I learn the most when things are tough or when things are compressed, because I have to look at things closer, either in myself or in the infrastructure that I'm building. And I think it's important to just tune into those things and pass them on to others so that they can learn as well. What's your experience been in that space?
When I meet people, like I don't want to hear about their wins. Like I want to hear about failures. I want to hear about like being in the mud, bloody, stuck alone on a mountaintop, and like help me understand how the hell you got out of that. Because there's a lot more to be learned about how somebody escaped a really challenging situation versus ascended to a mountaintop and, without being hurt, right? And how do they emotionally, spiritually, physically respond, and what do they learn? And I think, our jobs, like one of my favorite lines, I'm stealing from Jeff Bezos because I heard him get interviewed by his brother Mark Bezos at an event, and his brother said, "Hey, tell the crowd what you do at the campfire. What's the cheers you do?" And he said, "It's very simple. And I do it every time, and it's to adventure and fellowship." And he went on for an hour to talk about those two words. And by the end of it, I was pretty well convinced. I don't think there's a better way to describe the human experience and our why, which is go on meaningful adventures, which means doing things that perhaps others haven't done before, or they've done it, but they came back and, there's a little risk to it. That's the whole point of an adventure is there's risk management, and do it with people you enjoy spending time with. And I think if you can build that ethos into the mindset of entrepreneurs, that like when you go off to start a company, like, is it an adventure and are you doing it with people you like? Do you want to be in a canoe with them, in the midst of a rapid that's coming up with a waterfall at the end of it? Is that person going to save your life if you fall out, or are they just going to leave you behind? And so it's kind of a windy answer to your question, but I think how people deal with adversity is so interesting to me because I want to learn, and I sure as hell have stubbed my nose enough times to be humbled that like I got a lot to learn from others.
I think that's great perspective. And in my view, adversity is a gift because many times it serves as the chiseling grounds of seeing who you are, seeing others around you, and seeing the opportunities. And I think those are the best moments in the school of life because many things can't be shared just in a book form. We have to go through it, experience it, live it, embrace it, and deal with it. So it's the beauty of the process. It's the beauty of the journey.
I'm reminded of one of my favorite quotes, which is out of a song by Leonard Cohen, Anthem, which goes like this. It's ring, ring, ring the bell that can still ring. Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. And I think about that a lot. I broke my neck doing jujitsu. I ruptured C6, C7 vertebrae, and I was almost paralyzed. It was really, really bad. And I was in the midst of putting on our major event, like a couple weeks out from it, and I had to have spine surgery. And they had to make an incision here and go through my throat, and literally like detached my head from my back in terms of the bone thing, and then put in an artificial spine bit, and then put me back together. I literally walked out of the hospital 3 hours after the surgery.
Wow.
It was like unbelievable. I couldn't believe that had happened. And I've got this scar right here as a reminder of that quote of that's where the light gets in, is through your cracks. And because that was a really challenging experience for me. And now I love this scar. I had to interview President Bush on stage 2 weeks after this at a major event I was putting on, and the whole thing was like I had spine surgery and I had to fit 6 weeks of preparation for an event into 2 weeks where I'm still recovering, and then MC this major event while I've got this thing here, and I almost passed out on stage like twice. Nobody knew, and then it ended with interviewing one of the most powerful, important people in the world. And this is not a time to screw up, nor can you have an excuse. And getting through that, man, I was so proud. And it reminded me that you can get through really difficult things. So even when it's not so obvious and you're a little scared, I think being scared is good. It makes you better.
Cyrus, I want to thank you for your time. Your words, your vision, and your example are inspiring. And it's a pleasure spending time in the canoe with you. I look forward to our conversations in the days ahead and years ahead too. And thank you for sharing your insights to our listeners today.
Anytime you got an open seat in the canoe, let me know. Happy to jump in there with you.
Deal. Thanks. Thank you for listening and tuning in to Day in a Canoe. We're thrilled to have you as part of our community. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and share it with your friends and loved ones. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on social media platforms by searching Day in a Canoe. We'll see you next time.